All right, well then, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Charlotte Fullerton. I'm a writer on many things, mainly kids' TV shows, animation, like Ben 10, Kim Possible, Superhero Squad, Avengers, and the upcoming Thunderbirds Are Go, and of course, because of the title of this panel, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. And we'll talk about the writing. We'll talk about the writing of that today. Now, as many of you may know, I wrote on the first two seasons, most concentrated, and then wrote another episode, I want to say on the fourth season, I think I skipped the third, and then I haven't been involved in the show since. So I can't tell you any spoilers is where I'm going with this. You can ask me all you want, I can make stuff up if you want me to, but I honestly don't know any more than you do about where the show's going, but I can talk about where it's been. So that having been said, does anybody have any questions to kick us off? Because I just want to kind of aim the panel at what you guys want to know. How about you?
Do you have like a favorite My Little Pony? Like, out of all the ponies, which one's your favorite?
That's a good question. Do I have a favorite My Little Pony? Of all the ponies, which one's my favorite? Easy, Twilight. Because not only do I love purple and books, but apparently we have a lot in common. My late husband would say, when I wrote the Look Before You Sleep episode with the sleepover, and Twilight has her list of how they officially must have fun. And I think he was like, that seems a little, that seems a little familiar. I'm like, all right, well, but yeah, so we like things, studious types and like to have things done a certain way.
You know my favorite.
Yay, yes I can, which is awesome. Yay, zombie Pinkie Pie. Thank you.
When you were hired for the show, what was Lauren Faust's overarching vision? Like, what did she talk to you about?
Wow, that's a very good question. When I was hired for the show, what was Lauren Faust's overarching vision for the show? And I was hired very early on. I think the first episode I did was episode 8 of the entire series. So there weren't any episodes completed, obviously, by then for me to watch and kind of get to know. So we had what they call on television a series Bible, lowercase b, which is everything that every writer needs to know about all the characters, all the places, everything you would need to know about to write the show. And it had all Lauren's artwork in it, and at the time, Twilight, my favorite character was Twilight Twinkle, and I had changed her name to Twilight Sparkle for legal reasons. I guess somebody else was possibly one of the Disney fairies, but I don't know that for a fact. I already had the rights to the to the name, and that does happen sometime. Things like even Look Before You Sleep changed to when I wrote it, it was Opposites Attack, and certain other things. So when fans come up to me and ask, "Oh, that episode you wrote," well, oh, okay, it changed. Or My Phoenix, Philomena, I guess she was Phoebe the Phoenix. But I completely lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I'm very jet lagged from Japan, so I don't know what day or time it is. And who are you people? What are you all doing in my living room? Lauren. So when we had our first story meeting, and what they did was Lauren Faust and Rob Renzetti, who I don't know why he doesn't get the love that he should from the fan community, because Rob was a huge part of those first two seasons. Equal to Lauren in a lot of ways, and also, created My Life as a Teenage Robot, which killed. I love that show. Like, it's so funny to hear, not that Lauren, doesn't deserve all the praise she gets, and certainly Megan as well. Like, why isn't Rob up there? In terms of, so I'm lobbying lobby for Rob. Let's get his name out there and get him the accolades he deserves. The two of them and I sat down to talk about that particular episode that I'd be writing. But at the time, they didn't know how, and it's not only on Pony, it's on a lot of shows, you don't know how many episodes you're going to get to do. They were only planning to do 26 because that's what they've been hired to do, and had no idea it was going to take off, certainly in the fan community, but even that it would sell toys or that it would do what Hasbro initially set out for. So you just don't know when you get these jobs. So it's interesting when you hear people talk about their long-term, their 5-year plan or 20-year plan. We knew all along that that's what we were going to do, like on X-Files, whatever, some of these franchises that have gone, like, sure, come on, or Lost, you had to be making it up as you were going along, because you didn't know. No one would. You didn't know why would you have a 10-year plan for something that might only be 13 episodes? So, they just briefed me on who each of the characters were, and it was all in the materials Lauren had already come up with, and what their relationships were with each other, and I love putting characters in situations where they're extremely uncomfortable and they're outside of their comfort zone. And so that's why I did it, obviously, with Opposites Attack, and wanted to have Rarity she's the girly girl, but not have her be vapid and sort of annoying, and certainly not somebody that I thought I could write. Like Rarity, I thought was going to be the hardest for me. It's the least like me. Like, I'm not the hair and makeup type, just not super stylish. And I thought, hey, I'm going to write her like Monica on Friends. Is the way I did it. And so she just wants everything to be just so. And that includes things looking pretty, and but that's her big, and it's also kind of in conflict with the generosity thing. So it worked really well, and dealing with Lauren and Rob, it's not that I came up with any of that kind of stuff, but I just sort of contributed ideas to things that they already had plans for the characters. So I hope that answered your question. I'm just kind of rambling here. Good, yay! I rambled in the right direction. Yes.
So more process kind of stuff.
Sure.
Ponies or any shows that you work on. You say you write the episode, but sort of what do you have when it comes to you? Do you have storyboards? Do you have just a general sort of, we want to get from this point A to that point B?
That's a good question.
And what
the fact that you mentioned, do I have storyboards are drawn based on what we write in the scripts. Okay. We tell the artists what they need to draw. They're not just boarding things randomly. The storyboards are basically like shooting the movie, shooting a TV show. That's the equivalent of that step in the production. So we have to come up with the idea for the episode. They call it a springboard, and it's like a little thing. I was just going to date myself by saying a TV guide, but like on TiVo or on your DVR, where it just has a little paragraph describing. That's what we call a springboard idea. And instead of, I think for my first, for an Opposites Attack, or rather Look Before You Sleep, I think I pitched them that idea. I can't remember. Sometimes you go in with, as a writer, you go in with springboard ideas. Well, how about this? How about this? How about this? And sometimes they say, we have an idea for an episode, we want you to do it. And it's been so many years, I honestly now cannot remember. I'd have to look at my own computer to see if they assigned it to me or not. But I come in myself as a freelance writer. There's not like a staff of writers all sitting around in a room together. It's just one person at a time. Comes in to meet in person with Lauren and Rob, and we sit there all day, and they do things. At Ben 10, we did things on the dry erase board. Like I'd stand there and write teaser, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, tag, and then come up with all the story beats, we call them, which are basically bullet points of this happens first, this happens second, this happens next. It becomes the outline. And Rob and Lauren come from an animation background as animators first, writers second. So they still do things the way they learned in school on 3x5 cards and sticking them up on the wall. So same thing though with teaser, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I don't think Pony had a tag scene. And their story beats are on individual 3x5 cards, and then at the end of the meeting, the end of the day, Lauren just stacks them all up and puts a rubber band around it and hands it to you. And I understand some of those are floating around on eBay or something like that. Like, I don't think I saved mine. I should have. But that, more about the kind of springboarding to the whole writing process with that question. So I would come in, me or one of the other writers, come into a just generic conference room, nothing fancy, with Lauren and Rob, and just start talking about what is going to happen in this story, every step along the way, and bullet point it. This happens, this happens, this happens, and that's why they're on cards so that you can rearrange it. Why we do things on a dry erase board at Ben 10 and on other shows, even just do it on on the Mac and have it up on the screen like this, and people change. You can basically tell everyone's age by the way that the showrunner is most comfortable taking notes. But that's the most fun part, I think, is when we're just kind of coming up with all the crazy stuff, because there's no censoring yet. You're not really thinking in terms of, you are thinking in terms of production, but nobody's giving you notes yet. You're not having to decide what can and can't be done. It's just, oh, is this funny? Is this going to work? Is this great? Okay, put it in. And that was one thing that was wonderful about with Lauren. She said not to self-censor. Like, is there a couple times where I don't know, will they let us do that? Is that pushing it too much? And not in terms of obscenity, but just whether it's if it's a little too edgy for a kid's show, and at the time a preschool kid's show. And she would, no, go for it, which was wonderful because I wrote it the way I had been writing, the way I'd written Fairly Odd Parents, which is similar in tone and what I consider kind of old school Muppety, where it's aiming for a level for adults and for children, and that's what I always enjoyed. I enjoyed as a child and enjoy now as an adult. So it's so cool that it took off and that it worked. You know, that you guys all got it. That's what we're hoping for. But you never know. You know, like we thought it was awesome, but we didn't know if it was really going to resonate with other adults. We were just hoping the kids would, buy the ponies, and Hasbro would be happy with the sales. Oh my God, it's actually a good show. And that's something else. People have their hands up, but I'll get to it in 1 second. I just want to make sure I say, when Lauren first asked me to write on the show, it's because Amy Keating Rogers, a friend of mine who I had recommended me to Lauren, so I owe her a big thank you for that. And when I met with Lauren at her house, I was like, this is My Little Pony is it 11 minutes or 22 minutes? And it's 22, like, how is this a show? Are they going to brush each other's hair for 22 minutes? Like, this is what they did in the 80s, and I didn't even remember the cartoon from the 80s, a little too old for it then. That I remember the commercials for the toys, and that's all I remember, the hairbrush. I don't understand, I'll take the job, but I don't really know how I'm going to do it. And then when she sent me her Bible, lowercase b materials, and it was just so wonderful. All the characters exactly the way they ended up being in the show. They looked like themselves, they behaved like they're just such clear-cut individuals. They're more human than a lot of the human characters that I've had to write. Certainly the female human characters that I've had to write on other shows. It's whenever I tell people who are not Bromies, who aren't into it, they're like, oh yeah, My Little Pony. I'm like, no, forget that it's called My Little Pony. Because I know what you're thinking. I was thinking the same thing. No, just forget. It's actually a really good show. Seriously, it's really good. And not just because I'm a part of it, I would be a fan of it otherwise too. Sure, it'd be great.
As an independent or as a freelance screenwriter, where does your job begin? Like, do the networks, do they send out, or the studios send out like a call for writers, and an agent picks it up, or?
Good question.
If you need an agent, where do you get one?
I wish it worked like that. In kids, it's very much more of a free-for-all. We're kind of on our own. I do have, it's not an agent, a manager, similar, but different legalities involved. But one of the two big management companies in Los Angeles that pretty much represent every writer in animation, so I'm with one of them. The Gotham Group, go Gotham. But it's really who you know. A lot of the time, like I said, if I had known Amy Keating Rogers, I wouldn't have gotten the job. I'm convinced of it. I wouldn't have known about it. By the time, like a lot of jobs in other professions, by the time it's advertised, you know the position's already been filled by somebody who knows someone at that company. It's kind of the same way. Like if you know the head writer, once they get their head writing job, months before they're hiring writers, they're already calling their friends and former colleagues and finding out who's going to be available or who they know who is appropriate for that subject matter. And if that person isn't available, if they can recommend somebody. So they've already assembled their team before the project's really even announced to the world, and certainly even to the other writers in town. So it's not quite as straightforward as what you're suggesting. Kind of wish it were, because then it would be, oh, okay, you get an agent, and they are the ones who find out about all these jobs, and then they tell you. And yes and no. I mean, I guess it can work that way sometimes, but it doesn't tend to. Let's see, how about you back there, ma'am? Yes?
I was just curious, how long have you been doing this, and like, was this something you always wanted to do with the animation writing, or?
Sure. She's asking me how long I've been doing this, and it was something I've always wanted to do. A long time, since it's the 90s, and yes, it's something I've always wanted to do, animation writing for kids. specifically Sesame Street and the Muppets is what I really wanted to do when I was little. And it may also just be because I had a really limited palette. My parents were really strict about the television that we watched, so I just watched Saturday morning cartoons and then PBS. So I had Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, Electric Company, 3 to 1 Contact, was sort of mine. And Saturday morning cartoons. But I always wanted to be doing this. I'm one of the few people who's just lucky enough to have grown up. Like, this is my real grown-up life? Oh my God, this is more dressed up than I have to be for, work clothes. Yeah, I can't believe that I actually get to do this. But I grew up in Massachusetts in a small town and wanted to do this for a living with absolutely no connections in Los Angeles or the entertainment industry, or how do you go from, I'm here in my parents' house, delivering newspapers in my neighborhood, how do I go from that to being behind the scenes and writing on a TV show of any kind, never mind my favorite properties. And I was lucky enough to get to meet Jim Henson when I was a child at, I was going to say an event like this, but it was a speaking engagement at MIT, where my older brother was an engineering major, mechanical engineering undergrad. And I had never been to any fan conventions. If they had them, I just didn't know about them, or they must have been in Boston, which I didn't spend a lot of time in Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts, but I wasn't actually in Boston. So I had never met any writers from my favorite shows, or actors, voice actors, any of this kind of stuff. So it's always neat to see kids in the, I'm Italian, I have to talk with my hands. See kids in the audience, because I would have loved that. I don't know, I don't know. I would have been intimidated. I was a pretty shy kid. I never shut up now, so no one can imagine it, but I was super, super quiet and timid as a kid, which I was with Jim Henson too. But thankfully my dad was with me because he had to be. I couldn't drive. So my brother invited me to come hear Jim Henson speak. I begged my dad, please, please, please drive me to Boston. Please, I'll never ask you for anything again as long as I live, please. And yeah, it's just, I hate telling that story over and over because I've told it over and over and it's online, so you can hear me telling it at length, but turning point in my life for sure, absolutely. I mean, I knew I wanted to do this, but that was the way he's the one who told me that I should go to USC for film school, which I wanted to do because I read about it in George Lucas's autobiography, Skywalking. And that's the only film school I hadn't heard of marching bands, I didn't know about football, I didn't know anything about USC, I just knew, okay, that's where you go. And Mr. Henson confirmed that. He said that your peers there will be your peers in the industry someday, and that turned out to be the case. So hopefully that, again, I'm jet lagged, I apologize, but hopefully that answers your question. How about you?
So I've noticed in the more current seasons, there's a lot more music, there's a lot more singing. Have you ever written songs? Or
I have written songs, and I was nominated for and lost an Emmy for one. But 2-time loser and proud of it. It was the Find a Pet song. Best Pet Hit. My friend Kevin Rubio and I co-wrote that song, and whole first act of that episode. It was wonderful. We got to do a Sondheim musical. Actually, it wasn't a Sondheim musical. If you remember Dr. Dolittle, So Many Wonderful Places, that was our inspiration for that. So many wonderful choices. But yeah, I think largely because I'm a musician, Amy certainly is a musician, a singer. There's so many people that are musically inclined among the writers that once we started putting in, like in Suited for Success, and we started putting music into our episodes, writing the lyrics within the script, and then of course, the actual composer of the show would compose the music, but with direction from us. I think there were enough of us wanting to do that it wasn't like a directive from on high that now there will be music. It just sort of evolved that way. And I'm so glad it did, because it's a ton of fun.
Well, I've heard that fans, like on Twitter, were asking for more. And I didn't know if that maybe influenced it at all. Or
I honestly don't think so. Because I think it really had to do with the writer's affinity was for doing, we were already doing it. But it's always great that the fans love it too. There was somebody else over here that I think I skipped over. Oh, go ahead.
What was my question? When you're writing a script, how much wiggle room is there for voice actors to sort of improv a little, and does that frustrate you?
It depends. She's asking about when you're writing a script, how much wiggle room there is for improv out of the voice actors. On something like Pony, it's tricky because they record the voice actors largely in Canada, and only Tara Strong's in LA with us. She's also our young Ben 10 on Ben 10, and among a million other voices that she does. But it's hard without having the actors right there in the room with you. It's a lot easier when the writers are in the room. If the actors are going to improv, and you can sort of decide on the spot whether it works or not. It's also tricky for time. There's only so much time. We've got 22 minutes, and even if they do something that's brilliant, it's like, that's great. It's too long. Now our episode's a minute too long. We're either going to cut it from someplace else, or so these sort of decisions don't necessarily get made on the fly like that. They might improv and then just record it and hang on to it and decide if they want to use it later or in another episode or something. That's probably a better question for a producer, I would think, because I don't get to be at the recording sessions because I'm in Canada. So I'm just winging it based on what I know from other recording sessions that I am at. Those kind of considerations. It's not just actors, winging it, making up whatever they want, and it's brilliant, and that ends up being the show. It's still written. They stick to the script pretty close. Even when they do improv, it's within the bounds of what's already written there. Yes?
You mentioned that you were instructed not to censor yourself when writing.
By Lauren, I should say, not by the greater powers that be.
Yeah.
Just in the beginning.
Right? Were there any jokes that you wrote that were considered too edgy and were pulled, and do you have a favorite?
No, because the thing I thought that was going to get pulled was Phoebe the Phoenix, so I think ended up being called Philomena in the end. Yeah. The whole concept of her with her smoker's cough and I'm like, can we do this? The show is for preschoolers, I'm like, really? It was a ton. We were just busting up laughing, and then she burst into, obviously, as an adult you're watching it, she's a phoenix and where this is going to go, but for kids, and I'm thinking, poor Fluttershy, I think the thing is now it's in ashes, and like can we do this? I'm like, and the Benny Hill bit was in the script too. All these things that you might think were improv, and was very heavily scripted, and I still, same kind of thing that I think of as being very Muppety. The idea of doing a Benny Hill bit. What 4-year-old is going to know that reference? Heck, what 24-year-old is going to know that reference? And I'm barely old enough to catch it myself. I have seen it on PBS. But it's funny, let's do it. And much like the Muppets, back in the day, if you get it, great. If you get the reference, great. Otherwise, it's just a funny bit unto itself of them running back and forth. And then eventually, you age into it, and you get the reference. Oh, you finally see Benny Hill 20 years later. Go, they're doing My Little Pony. The other thing I can think of, and it's not edgy, but at the time I was questioning it, is in May the Best Pet Win, when Rainbow is doing the initial auditions of her potential pets, and the butterfly, I think it's a butterfly. I don't know if it got cut or not now. You'll have to let me know. There's a ladybug that she dresses down who slowly backs out of frame. So if any of you think you don't have what it takes, just bow out now before you embarrass yourselves. And then the butterfly, she gets right up in his face, like, up in his, you call that flapping? With this kind of stuff. I was, we're busting up in the room as I was pitching the ideas, and I'm like, well, we can't put that in the script. He said, oh yeah, you have to put it in the episode. Okay. But it just didn't seem appropriate for a preschool show.
Rainbow Dash has half a dozen inappropriate things in every episode.
That's what's so much fun, and that they were actually allowed to do that, and it works. That makes the episodes work for little kids, older kids, teens, adults. Sort of these, like, all roads lead to the Muppets for me. But that those multiple, 11, I'm sure Warner Brothers cartoons, different fans of different fandoms would attribute it to other things than Muppets. But to me, it's a Muppets story. Of course, Muppets took it from vaudeville, so I can't even give it all to them.
I'm assuming you've seen the completed episodes at some point.
I have.
Do you have a favorite one?
Of my own or of all?
Well, both.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, I'm going to go with Make Best Pet Win, just because, you know, the Emmy nomination really kind of pushes it up there a little bit. That was pretty cool. Yeah, I guess I'd have to say that's my favorite one.
What do you think? Okay, was it very? I don't know how to say this, but do you like that Twilight's princess? And do you think it was kind of obvious when her element of harmony was a crown?
Well, it's obvious to us as adults. You know, some of those things you think, oh, it must be obvious. I don't know. Would it have been obvious to me when I was 5? I'm not so sure. I might have been hopeful if I'd seen that. Well, maybe this means, but I don't think I would have seen it as a, you know, the definitive. And I think it sort of had to happen. She had to become a princess. I mean, that was sort of the point, I think, at the beginning when she first went to Ponyville, to, you know, at the very beginning, I mean, you know, to actually learn how to make friends, and the idea that she needs to return to Equestria, and she needs to, you know, sort of accept her royal heritage. No, I think that was, it wouldn't be foreshadowed for little kids, but I think that the grown-ups watching kind of would have been dissatisfied if that actually hadn't eventually occurred now. The only episode I wrote where Twilight was a princess eventually was a princess was Power Ponies. So in that I didn't even get to do the princessy stuff too much, because obviously we got to do superhero-y stuff.
But you got to do Hulk Fluttershy.
Yes.
So.
I'm so happy. That was the one thing that I pitched in terms of, you know, which pony would be a good comparable superhero, and please, Fluttershy has to be the Hulk. She has to go on. It would be a missed opportunity not to, and I'm so happy they let us do it. So that's another one of those examples of where I say, oh, I'm so happy they let us do it. It's not like there's this evil regime on high that won't let the creative people do what they want to do. Everybody wants to make a really cool, really fun, really good show. We're all, including the executives, including, you know, all these people who are supposed to be anti, you know, creativity. They're wonderful. These are my actual friends I hang out with away from work. You know, they may not write the show, but they're creative in their own ways for sure. And they, you know, they love the idea of Fluttershy and of the whole concept. You know, the idea of doing Power Ponies at all. That's another thing that I would have thought, oh God, you're never going to let us do this. And like, no, we'll try it. And we're 100% behind it. So, yeah, if anything I've learned at conventions, I'm trying to sort of spread the word of there's no, you know, powers that be that are, you know, crushing all of our dreams. You know, it's like, no, that's their dreams too.
Do you have a favorite pony to write for?
To write for, that's a good question. That's different than my favorite pony, Twilight, that is most like me, but I would never have thought this going into the job, but Rarity, I have to say, is my favorite to write for, because she's just such a basket case. She
has the best problem.
She tries so hard. She wants everything to be, you know, she wants everybody to be happy. She wants it. But then again, I was on a panel once at a BronyCon, I can't remember which, and Megan was there, and Mitch, and a bunch of us talking about how somehow we, as writers, we all seem to be assigned to the episodes that somehow reflected a part of our own personality, and not the storyline. But then I looked back on my episodes going, yeah, my characters all seem to be on the brink of a nervous breakdown or something. They're all just being pushed to the edge and just beyond their comfort zone to the point where they almost can't take it. You know, like, I love that. That's the most fun to write anybody, but yeah, when I think of Rarity at the, you know, certainly Suited for Success, oh my God, that was great when she's doing the Norma Desmond thing at the end, and yeah, that was so much fun. Oh, yes, you.
So you said that you had a pony Bible that you were given, but that you also wrote the episode, the Power Ponies.
Yes.
Were you given the character Maniac, or were you part of the people that came up with it?
Part of the people that came up with it, yeah. When we came up with the story, not only did we pitch ideas, you know, each pony and a corresponding superhero equivalent that they could be, both the powers and the type of costume they could have, and the names. We had to come up with different names, but also the villain and what the villain. But I think largely, if I remember correctly, it was Megan who came up with Maniac. I always hate to take, like when people say 20% cooler, oh, one of your lines of dialogue is a meme, and I said, I remember being in the story meeting and writing it down and thinking that was hysterical. but I think Lauren said it. It was Lauren or Rob, it wasn't me. I wish I could take credit for it, but I don't. It is in my episode, I did write it, but I don't think I came, and the same thing with Maniac. I really need to give the credit to Lauren, to Megan on that one.
Just as a follow-up.
Oh, sure.
At the end of that episode, we saw the book sort of disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any sort of insider knowledge? I mean, I know a lot of the other end of episode things came back that season, but
I honestly don't, because I'm a freelancer, so I'm not, we're all freelancers, I'm not the head writer on that show, and I actually was on Ben 10 full-time. That's why I didn't write on season 3, and I only wrote that Power Ponies during a break in between Ben 10 seasons in the summer. So I'm the wrong person, so I don't know. But I do know that when we do things on any show, like seeing the book disappear, certain things like that, leaving, what fans think of is, all these loose threads, or, but the thing is that we do loose threads on purpose, so that we then have threads to go back to when we have to come up with, if we get picked up suddenly, like on Ben 10 for another 80 episodes, when you go, you look back through the series, and my husband, thankfully, he was big on this, you purposely leave threads hanging, story threads hanging, or you have a character mention, boy, I'm glad that, this reminds me of that time wherever, or you're like, I'm glad this isn't happening again. And just that word again is like, oh, this has happened before, this reminds me of something. So you then leave yourself the opening as a writer to go back and explore that, or not. And the fans online tend to get all bent out of shape when you don't go back and explore that immediately. But the whole point is to leave it hanging. And maybe never go back to it, but it's to leave yourself options as a writer. Yeah. I love that word again, by the way. They do it on The Simpsons all the time. It cracks me up every time. Let me ask, I see you there, but I'm going to ask somebody else who hasn't asked a question yet. How about way in the back there?
My question regards the continuity you deal with, especially writer to writer, whether it's with MLP or with Ben 10 or any of the other work that you've done. Would just like to know what your biggest frustration is that you saw in discontinuity from working writer to writer, and also what you felt was the best example that you worked with going writer to writer in terms of continuity within a series.
Interesting. Let me back up a little bit just to sort of explain how the process works. Because we're not in any of these kids' shows, there's no writer's room of staff writers like there would be on a sitcom where we're all sitting there all together, we all come up with the shows, and then one person takes credit on, just going around the room on every single script. It's the story editor, which is head writer, they just call it story editor, but that's the head writer, who in my case was Rob Renzetti, who's in charge of keeping track of all these different freelance writers who are assigned individual scripts. Like I didn't even meet Mitch Larson until we were on a panel at a convention together. Like we don't know each other in the workplace. You're working by yourself and for the head writer, and in this case, the producer, Lauren, at these meetings. They're the ones who keep the continuity of all this. They know what's come before, and they know what's going to happen ahead of time, and they know what's going on in your script. So it's not really up to you as the lone freelance writer to know or care. They will correct you, if you're not doing things in continuity. On Ben 10, by Omniverse, I was one of the co-head writers on that, so that gave me a lot more, both security and and lack of sleep, of course. So you feel better about knowing because you know the big picture, but then you're also responsible for maintaining that big picture, and then the continuity's on you. I'm trying to think of examples of times when I wasn't happy with any continuity. Well, mention some continuity issues you had issue with, and I'll tell you whether they bother me or not. I can't think. There's not like one thing where God, I wish I hadn't done that. On other shows for sure, but I can't think of.
Well, was there ever a time when a editor came to you and said, "No, we cannot do this," that you felt that you would have wished you could have pushed back?
I'm sure that's happened. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but usually, the editor. I mean, every time the editor's going to have a good reason for it, and you just don't know yet as a writer. They say, you can't do this because this character is going to be dead by the time your episode airs. Like on a different kind of show than My Little Pony. But, something like that. We're like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't do that. Or you just don't know yet because you weren't at the story meetings for the previous 5 episodes before yours, but we actually are building this whole thing where Twilight's going to become a princess, and so you can't do this in yours because, oh, okay, you know. So there's never been anything to push back against that I've experienced. It's always been for good reason. It's not just like, we hate you, your ideas are stupid, because they wouldn't hire me if they, you know, I guess I never experienced that mean executive against poor put upon creative person. Thankfully, knock, 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 I haven't yet. I've just jinxed it. No, you are still listening to me. So somebody raise your hand over here.
Which character is the trickiest to write for, or the hardest for you? Okay, continuity wise.
Maybe Applejack, and I say that after she was one of the first characters I wrote, of course. For me, and I know one of our early executives in those first 2 seasons, Linda Steiner, was who I'd known from Warner Brothers Animation years ago, and she was the executive at Hasbro, who's from, I want to say, Kentucky or Tennessee or something, and she was really sensitive to the not making her sound like a hick and not making her sound stupid, and so I was always sort of afraid, you know, I don't want to do anything that, you know, makes her, and in general, I wouldn't want to do that, and I was sort of nervous about writing something that would make her sound. So, like in Opposites, I keep saying Opposites Attack, Look Before You Sleep, I did Oscar and Felix from The Odd Couple. Obviously, when you watch it, you can see, you know, somebody's neat and somebody's sloppy, and of course, she's the sloppy one. But writing lingo that makes, you know, it's one thing to write in vernacular, it's another thing to make her sound dumb, you know, and I think that was early on, that was kind of a consideration. I don't know if it ever became a problem, but I was worried about it early on. No, I mean, Rarity was the only one that really made me afraid, like overtly, like I can't write this character, that's not me, I so don't have anything in common with this. And it just goes to show, it's like, wow, these characters, every one of us has something in common, a little sliver of something about us that we have in common with each of these ponies, which again, sounds weird to say to people who aren't into My Little Pony. like no, seriously, it's a good show. And that the characters are legitimate, more legitimate, authentic human characters that I've almost ever written on any other show. And only they're ponies, but they are still more clearly, especially as females, my gosh, to be able to write a cast of female characters where it's not just, it's the girl, and that's her definition of what her purpose in the show is, to be rescued. Like my husband had this rule about, you know, you can never have the girl in the show just there to be rescued, and I'm so glad. Hopefully other people are picking up that as a rule as well. But the fact that you have a cast of many girls, then you don't just have the girl, then you also don't have the constraints of having to worry about making the girl the girl. If there's only one girl, then she can't be anything negative. If she's at all petty or jealous or something, all girls are always petty and jealous. All girls are, so you can't, if you have only one, you know, African American character, you cannot say anything negative with about that particular character. If they're just a dick, like the person is, you can't, because you're saying it about because that's the only one. You're saying it, and the only solution to it is to have more than one. You can have an Asian character, have several, so that they can be their own individual person. And the first time I ever experienced that was on Pony, where I got to have girls be their own individual people, because there were enough of them on screen. Right. That it wasn't, oh, all girls are, you know, or vain or whatever. No, Rarity is being vain. Or all girls are backstabbing with gossip. No, you know, whoever, I'm just throwing it up, I'm not referencing a specific episode, but it was really, really liberating to, oh my gosh, I get to write. And again, to say it to people who are not fans, like, My Little Pony, I mean, don't think of that. If I could come up with another title that you would be able to attribute to something positive instead of the old 80s commercials with brushing their hair. Somebody with their hand appeared in the door. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I could see a hand and I couldn't see the rest.
I'm curious, as a writer, when you're writing the scripts, do you see the show playing out in your head, or do you think more in terms of just words?
Because it's an animated series, I absolutely see the show playing out. But I would if it was live action anyway, because I think that's just the way. I'm not sure. You have to talk to people who write live action more than I have. The only live action I've really written that's been produced is Power Rangers back in the day, Mighty Morphin and Zeo days, way back in the day. My very first produced scripts. But for sure, you've got to be able to picture it, because what you're putting in the script is what somebody over here was mentioning storyboarding, it's what the artists are going to draw. You have to tell them what the heck, if they get the script, they need to do their job, they need to know what to draw. So you have these much more detailed scene descriptions in an animation script than you would in a live action script, let's put it that way. Big blocks sometimes of scene description. So that, and only the important stuff. And then also the artists will bring more to it, and themselves certainly, and the directors will. But you've got to let them know what the heck we're supposed to be drawing today on the job.
What do you think of the rise of writer as celebrity?
I don't know that I've seen it happen. Like Joss Whedon, I can't really.
I guess writers
Back in the
coming
day,
out of the
David
shadows
Kelly,
and being more well known.
Like us?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't think of us as being, only in our fandom, but not that well known. I think it's great because I get to come places like Minneapolis. Woohoo! I was here once before and got to throw my hat in here like I brought a blue beret specifically to do that. It was really cool. So and I was surprised to see they had a statue down there from TV. I wasn't expecting it. I was like just going to stand there in the corner, spin around and throw my hat in the air. And a little old lady was walking by and watched me do it. I was like, oh, that's great. I wish I could do that. I was like, do you want to have a turn? And she was all excited. So sharing the love.
Have you viewed any fan works, like fan comics, fan fiction, or fan videos, and do you have any opinions on any of them?
That's a good question. And no, I haven't. We're not allowed to because some things that fans are doing could very well be similar to something that the company is actually developing or has been developing for years. And then if they go ahead and make their movie, whatever, they'll say, yeah, the fan will turn around and say, I'm going to sue you because Charlotte watched my fan film and she worked on your show 4 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever it's been. And now I'm going to sue you because obviously she stole my idea. There's too much of a legal quagmire, and so I just don't even watch. I don't get involved in it at all. I can't.
Does that preclude watching anything now that you're not writing currently for it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just for that reason, because I hate to say it, but people, you just don't know who you're dealing with. People, the strangers out in the world, seem reasonable until they snap and decide to sue Hasbro. It's like, because of me. No, especially because I'm not working there anymore. I don't want any trouble at all. It's not, I would say normally there's not enough money in it to offset that kind of trouble. Since I'm not working there, there's no money in it to offset that kind of trouble. So yeah, I just can't. And certainly when I am working on the shows like Ben 10 and things during the course of it, absolutely I can't read any of it. It's just too much trouble down that way lies madness. How about you?
What are other favorite shows that you have, either for the Muppet style humor or for quality characters or things like that?
I gotta go Buffy the Vampire Slayer on that one. For both Muppety style humor, what I consider Muppety style humor and characters. And then, really, my own favorite shows. Northern Exposure has got to be one of my top 10 shows of all time. Fantastic. I did a panel about writing dialogue earlier today, and I wish I had mentioned it. One of my favorite things in that show is how the characters will be having a conversation and they are talking about completely different things. They are not listening to each other at all, and it's wonderful. We never did get to do that on Pony. I should write that into something some way. But I love. They're not arguing. They're just not at all talking about the same subject. It's really fun.
I think Pinkie Pie might have done it once or twice.
Has she? Okay, good. I didn't get to write her that way, but that sounds like that. Yeah, I could see her doing that. Certainly not listening. Northern Exposure, MASH, I love certainly, and I watched that in reruns, but I caught the tail end of the first run. I wouldn't call it Muppety, but it's certainly character driven. MASH, Northern Exposure, one of my favorite shows, Buffy. and I gotta go, I'll fall back on the Muppets. Sesame Street. I'm all heartbroken because Maria is retiring. I mean, she's been 44 years, and not like she hasn't earned it, but wow, I just can't believe it. Sesame Street's never gonna be the same.
Yes, I was wondering if you, let's say tomorrow you get a call and say, hey, we want you to write another episode of Pony. You can write whatever you want. What would be the storyline?
Well, I better not say it because I may get that call. I never know. And I want to be able to say yes. So I don't know because I'm actually not familiar with where they've left off or what they have planned. So because I've been out of the loop, I haven't been at any of the meetings. So I'd have to get briefed on what's going on, what they've got projected, and then come up with ideas. So I don't have any ideas really that I'm like burning to do. Other than have two characters talk about something, have a conversation when they aren't talking about the same thing. Let me ask you, I was in the front row. Yes.
What are you working on right now?
I'm not allowed to tell.
All right.
I wish I could.
Does Wikipedia know?
They don't let us talk about it until the companies decide to make their big announcements. Like I couldn't talk about my Ant-Man episode of Avengers until it aired in May, and I still haven't seen it. But apparently there's a comic book adaptation of it now. It's going around on Twitter, and I was like, oh, really? Okay, I better pick that up. And a new Thunderbirds Are Go series that's out. But that's all stuff that I wrote in the past that's just now animated. So I wish I could tell you. Have me back as a guest next year, and then I'll go, remember last year, but I couldn't tell you. Well, that's just the cool thing.
Is it exciting?
It's always exciting. Of course it's exciting. Oh, yes, this guy did.
Well, I was just going to do a follow-up. What are those lead times? Like, when you write an episode, how long does it take before it hits the screen?
Well, it usually takes, in terms of animating something, they say about 8 to 10 months, but I always just sort of round it up to about a year from the time we come up with the idea to writing it up as a script, getting the thing recorded, storyboarded, the directors take over it and map it all out that way. They send it overseas where they actually animate it and do all the little sort of tedious in between. They've got to come back. I shouldn't belittle it that way. It's a huge amount of work. Comes back for things like sound design, obviously, all the effects you hear, the music, these kind of things, the mix. They send it back overseas again for any corrections that need to be done to the animation, and they call them retakes, and it takes about a year for all this. I've glossed over the most time-consuming part of the process, which is animating the darn thing. And then we all get to watch it about a year later. But then sometimes, even though if the episode's done, it's 10 months later, they've got the episode, it's finished for all intents and purposes. It doesn't air yet because they'll sit on things to do like a marathon, or if it's like a wintry episode, they want to do a special Christmas promotion or Halloween, or so sometimes there are episodes that are finished, but it's not like they air. Okay, we got it back and it's done and it's mixed and it's ready to go. It airs the next day. It doesn't work like that. They still schedule them where they want them. They being the network, where they want them to fall.
So where do the ideas, the core ideas for the episode come from? Do you bring an episode idea to the show, or do they give you, I want you to write an episode about this?
Sometimes it's either way. They'll have, sometimes we come in with springboards. I was talking earlier about the little TV guide, or now DVR descriptions of springboards, basically just the beginning, middle, and end of what the story would be. And I just turned into my Kermit the Frog voice when I started to say that. Not voice, but my intonation. The beginning, middle, and end. I don't know why. That's because I'm jet lagged. But sometimes it depends on the show and the showrunners, what they want. And at different times during the course of the same show, they'll say, we've come up with so many episodes, we need you guys being the freelance writers, to feed us some ideas, come in, pitch, and we'll see if anything sticks. So I've done that. I've pitched, like say on Kim Possible, I pitched a bunch of episode ideas, springboards, and they didn't go with any of mine, but they liked all the things that I was coming up with, and assigned me one of their in-house ideas. So it kind of goes, the ideas come from all over.
Yeah. The South Park guys, I forget which one actually writes the show, but whichever one it is, Fair Matt, has talked about before when he's writing a script, he sort of lets it all happen, And then he goes back and he says, everywhere that there's an and, I get rid of it, either cut the scene or I turn it into a but or a therefore.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering how you feel about that, or do you have your own rules, like your
The
own
fact that
sort
you
of...
just used the word that, but you used it correctly, that is an overused word for me. That one gets cut. That the opening a sentence with hey or oh or so or okay, that this idea that you're sort of ramping up it sounds like the writer talking to themselves. So anyway, let's go, and then the character says, let's go over here now, whatever it is they're going to say, but that all that extra lead up, I hate that. All these little comments, well, comma, okay then, unless it's a joke and you're doing it for, to notice that it's awkward. I hate that, and when it repeats, it becomes really tedious, actually, if you're reading and certainly if you're hearing it.
Unless you're writing Woody Allen or Rocco.
There you go. Well, that's purposeful. See? Let me go with this.
Do you like the Equestria girls idea of going to people?
That's a good question. I didn't at first. When I first heard about it before, so any of the drawings, I knew when they said they were just going to turn the ponies into real people, I was like, what? And then once I heard Megan was going to do it, I'm like, okay. Oh, it'll be good. Yeah, and it was. So I didn't at first, but then I learned my lesson, and dear Princess Celestia, my lesson today was to trust Megan McCarthy's writing. Let me ask you.
Were you invited to write for the new Power Rangers movie?
No, I haven't written any features. Unfortunately, we're in a different camp. The feature film people didn't approach any, and not just Power Rangers, but in general, don't approach the TV people. It's kind of like, I guess the actors kind of go through the same thing, but for different reasons. Not doing the voices in features.
They should learn from their mistakes and have
There was
God.
no movie made from our TV show.
It does not exist.
Nope. Retcon.
Okay.
Well, I was wondering, for the various positions you've had with writing for the different shows, what seems to be the expected time frame to turn out a finished script in those different positions? And then also, just two-parter because we're wrapping up, what projects do you have coming down the pipe that you're excited that you actually can tell us about?
I can't tell you about anything I've got coming up. But other than the things I mentioned that were done a long time ago by me, but they're airing now. And I forgot the first half of your, this is how jet lagged I am. I forgot the first half of your question, I'm sorry.
The average time frame.
Oh, the average time frame. There is no average. It's I've written things overnight, 33 pages overnight, which is always strange to me when people say, I wrote my screenplay, it took me 3 years. Like, 3 years? That's like, you should have written 20 by then. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? This is, yeah, so it depends. It's all deadline dependent. It's like having, my husband used to joke that being a writer is like having a term paper due every day for the rest of your life. And it is. If you find it stressful in college, then don't be a writer in life, because you always owe something to somebody. And there are sort of general schedules for how long writers get to write an outline versus a first draft or a second draft, and then they call it a polish as a third draft. But it's so flexible. It's based on how time crunched everything in the production is, and there's no union regulating it. So it's just whatever they it's like cutting lawns or mowing lawns or raking leaves for a living. How fast can you get it done? Oops, more questions? Let's see. Okay, two more.
As kind of a follow-up to your scene direction comment, do you write in the background ponies, or is that something the artists do?
It depends. If it's relevant to what's going on in the scene that I have to have, then absolutely yes. If it's something that the director just came up with, and the director, not the voice director, but the director who's in charge of all the storyboards, which is actually mapping out the story, in physical form. That's something they come in, sometimes they add, you know, if you see a little funny extra business going on, that's sometimes added by, that would be added by the director. But something like, say, Tank, the tortoise, I mean turtle, during Fluttershy's song with Rainbow in the Find a Pet song in May the Best Pet Win, when you see Tank sort of constantly trying to get Rainbow's attention and getting knocked away and stuff, that's totally scripted, because that's totally integral to the scene. I'm going to keep using the word totally. That's something I would cut. It's being overused. But something like that, absolutely, word for word, is in the scene. But he's not talking, so it's in the scene description. But it's super important to what's going on in that scene. Now, if it's just, I can't think of a good example, because it wouldn't have been in my script. I'd have to watch an episode and tell you, okay, that wasn't in my script. That's just some fun stuff that's in the background. So the directors definitely contribute. The animation directors contribute a lot to that kind of business. But I guess the only way to find out is to ask the writers whether it was in the script. But something like that, you can almost guess if you watch the episode, and if it's something, the physical bit of business that absolutely has to be there, or the scene's not happening, then I can almost guarantee it was written into the script. And there was one other question I wanted to go with. I think it was you. No? Are you getting shy now? Do we want to wrap this up? Okay, does somebody else want to have one last question? We've got 2 minutes left, so it's time for one last question. We'll let it be you. Okay.
The previous one, were any of the Derpy references ever scripted?
That I don't know about, because I wasn't part of the whole Derpy controversy. I was gone from the show and I heard about it after the fact. So I actually don't have any idea even what all that was about. I sort of read about it online, just
you know,
from...
cameo appearances that you're in all the episodes of season 2?
I have absolutely no idea. Like I said, I was gone by then, so I don't know. I didn't even know what the Derpy thing was about until years after. I said, Amy, what the heck is this? She just sort of had to explain it to me. Well, I saw her online, I guess, having some sort of conversation with somebody. I'm like, what are you talking about? Kind of unfortunate. Okay, let's end on a better question. Not better, but a more upbeat question. So I'm happy. It's good times. We're supposed to all be friends here, right?
I apologize if you already answered this, so you
okay.
can tell me auto-denied. But were you part of the process when they first decided that we're going to resurface the My Little Pony from the 80s Hasbro?
I wasn't, actually. I think Lauren definitely, she is the right age, and she grew up with My Little Ponies and playing with them in the 80s and loved them and was horrified by the TV show at the time as a little girl. And so she got to have her dream job of developing this, they call it also development, prior to hiring the writers. Somebody has to do all this development that then results in this Bible with the lowercase b. And that was Lauren who got to come in and do all that kind of stuff and turn the show. And basically, the show that we all know is what Lauren was playing with her My Little Pony toys when she was a little girl, instead of watching the TV show that was on at the time that she did one. So, yay! Thank you, little Lauren, for doing that. And on that happy note, that much happier note, yay! 4:30, I guess we have to call it quits and let whoever else is coming into this room. So thank you so much.